90% of Canadian tourists canceling U.S. trips. Travel is no longer just about vacation. It's now a political statement. Canadian tourists boycotting U.S. travel. Every year, millions of Canadian tourists cross the border into the U.S. from Florida to New York, spending billions of dollars on travel services. However, this year, things have changed dramatically. According to the Old Orchard Beach Tourism Council, Canada accounts for 40% of the tourists in the area, but this year, that number has sharply dropped. Hotel owners like Sterling Morse in Maine report that over 90% of their Canadian customers have canceled their trips, causing severe losses for local businesses. These numbers reflect a major disruption in the tourism industry, especially since Canadian tourists have been a stable source of income for many regions. This is not only impacting the economy, but also weakening the economic relationship between the two neighboring countries. So, why is this happening? Trade tensions and hostile rhetoric between politicians have led to this shift. This is not just about a tourism boycott, but a clear expression of national pride. For many Canadians, traveling to the U.S. is not just for fun. It's a recognition of a peaceful and respectful relationship. The tensions in international relations have eroded these values, leading to the decision not to travel to the U.S. as a way of protesting the administration's policies. This is also a signal that countries will no longer tolerate decisions that can harm mutual respect. Wide-ranging economic impact. According to the Maine Tourism Council report, Canadian tourists contribute about $1.2 billion annually to the local economy. Each Canadian tourist spends not only at resorts, but also in shops, restaurants, and attractions. This boycott could force many businesses to close or scale down operations during the tourist season. This issue isn't just affecting the tourism industry. Other industries like transportation, lodging services, and retail stores are also being hit hard. Businesses may need to find replacement customers or accept declining profits while costs remain unchanged. In the midst of a struggling economy, the absence of Canadian tourists not only reduces revenue, but also puts small businesses at risk of closure, deepening the economic crisis in the region. This isn't just tourism, it's a political statement. So, is tourism still just tourism? It's time we realize that tourism can now be a powerful tool for political statements. When people choose to boycott a country, not because they dislike the tourist attractions, but because of that country's policies and statements, it becomes a lesson in national pride. With 40% of the tourists at Old Orchard Beach being Canadian, this change could have far-reaching impacts. This isn't just a loss in revenue, but a message of dissatisfaction with the U.S. national policies. This tourism policy has now become a tool to express political views. It reflects not only the resistance from the Canadian people, but could spark similar movements from other countries, where tourism becomes a means to show discontent with U.S. international policies. This event is not only a blow to the U.S. economy, but also a lesson in respect within international relations. When a country decides to stop cooperating on tourism and consumption, it's not just about dissatisfaction, but a form of resistance to actions that could harm their values and sovereignty. It also shows that tourism isn't just about moving from one country to another, but now it's a part of soft power strategy. The Canadians are teaching the U.S. an important lesson in self-respect and respect. How will international relations change after this event? Will we see other countries adopt a similar strategy, using tourism as a tool to express dissatisfaction with the policies of other nations? To find out what happens next, stay with us and watch the rest of the video. In 2024, Tesla lost 14% of its market share in Norway, one of the world's most advanced electric vehicle markets. At the same time, the European Union warned it would respond strongly to America's new tax policies. And Canada, in a surprising shift, started sourcing military equipment from Europe rather than the US. What's really happening between these three power centers, the US, Europe, and Canada? During a recent meeting with NATO's Secretary General, President Donald Trump harshly criticized the EU's trade policies. "We have a problem with the EU. They won't import our agricultural products or our cars, while we import millions of BMWs, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagens." Trade between the US and EU exceeds $1.2 trillion annually. The EU maintains barriers against US agriculture and automobiles. The US remains largely open to European imports. Trump targets EU's favorable tax deals with Apple. labeling it a financial battle. Trump threatens additional tariffs, exacerbating tensions with major EU economies like Germany and France. Tesla, a symbol of American innovation, faces unprecedented criticism from European consumers and investors. In Denmark, the academic pension fund sold all Tesla shares due to union labor agreement refusals, poor governance, and Musk's controversial politics. Pension Denmark withdrew 400 million kroner after Tesla rejected labor agreements in Sweden, sparking widespread strikes. Service centers, transport hubs, and inspection points halted handling Tesla vehicles, severely disrupting Tesla's operations. Elon Musk's political remarks significantly harmed Tesla in Europe. Musk supported far-right parties such as Germany's AfD, UK's Reform Party, and controversial figures in Italy and Romania. Tesla's Norwegian market share dropped dramatically from 21.7% to 7.4% within 1 year. Positive opinions of Tesla fell from 19% to 11%. Negative opinions rose from 47% to 63%. In the UK, 59% of EV consumers refused to buy Tesla due to Musk's polarizing statements. European regulatory scrutiny on Tesla intensified, citing consumer safety and data protection concerns. Tesla struggles with brand reputation and labor issues, losing ground to competitors. Volkswagen, Toyota, and China's BYD introduced competitively priced models. Tesla criticized for delays in affordable model launches, losing edge to favored local brands. European manufacturers aggressively expanded EV production, benefiting from favorable policies and consumer loyalty. Canada is quietly forming a new economic and defense alliance with Europe. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly confirmed Canada's final talks to purchase European military equipment, including Sweden's Saab Gripen jets. Aim: reduce dependency on U.S. defense supplies amid trade policy uncertainties. EU-Canada Free Trade Agreement. CETA increased bilateral trade by 60% since 2017. Canada seeks to lessen dependence on the U.S., currently 75% of its exports. Enhanced Canada-EU collaborations extend to research, technology, and sustainable energy sectors, marking a strategic pivot from traditional U.S. partnerships. Facing new U.S. tariffs, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated, "If the EU is targeted by unfair trade practices, we will respond strongly." Europe considers retaliatory tariffs targeting products from pro-Washington U.S. states. The action aims to defend fair trade and communicate clearly that Europe will not tolerate protectionist moves. EU leaders indicate readiness to strengthen economic cooperation with allies like Canada, Japan, and South Korea to counterbalance U.S. policies. Are these shifts merely the beginning of a major realignment in the global economic order, one that increasingly sidelines the U.S. as Europe and Canada forge new alliances? Stay tuned, because what happens next could completely reshape your understanding of the global economy. Over $700 billion in trade and more than 100,000 jobs now hang in the balance. Canada, America's largest trading partner, is pulling investment, halting travel, and dumping assets. Is this just a temporary reaction? An economic bond that once seemed unbreakable for decades. The United States and Canada have shared a stable, deeply connected trade relationship. Bilateral trade between the two nations exceeds $700 billion every year. Canada is America's largest trading partner, accounting for over 15% of total U.S. exports. Millions of jobs in both countries depend on the steady flow of investment, tourism, real estate, and cross-border goods. But now, that relationship is beginning to crack. Not because of a financial crisis, not because of a natural disaster, but because of something far more personal. A growing sense of mistrust, and the feeling of being taken for granted. A nationwide movement, from individuals to industry. It started with a few personal decisions. Individual investors quietly pulling back from the U.S. market. But within just a few months, the wave spread across Canada. Small businesses began sourcing goods from Europe and Asia. Major retail chains started cutting their reliance on American suppliers. Local governments prioritized contracts with domestic or international partners, not the U.S. Some Canadian companies have made it clear they have no plans to return to the American market anytime soon. This is no longer a reaction. It's a full-scale realignment. The economic fallout for the United States regions once heavily reliant on Canadian tourists and investors, like Florida and Arizona, are feeling the hit. Property values are dropping as Canadians rush to sell off their real estate. Tourism is shrinking, cutting into revenue for hotels, restaurants, and local attractions. According to U.S. travel research groups, if just 10% of Canadian tourists reduce their annual spending, more than 100,000 American jobs could be at risk. States like New York, Nevada, and California, which welcome millions of Canadian visitors each year, are starting to feel the strain. A boycott driven by pride, not just profit. This wave of boycott isn't just about economics. It's rooted in collective emotion. For many Canadians, it's a stand to protect national identity. Comments seen as dismissive or domineering have sparked a deep sense of resentment. And Canada's answer? Not through arguments, not through confrontation, but through quiet action. Pulling their spending, their investments, and their travel away from the U.S. No shouting, no slogans, just pressure. Applied where it hurts most. Canada is charting a new course. This isn't just a boycott. Canada is building new trade alliances. Through the CETA agreement, nearly all tariffs with Europe have been eliminated. Via the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, Canada is now linked with Japan, Australia, Vietnam, and other fast-growing economies. And they're looking further, expanding ties with Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. Canadian companies are actively shifting supply chains, from manufacturing to logistics. The goal? To reduce dependence on the U.S. market and build long-term economic independence. Who's winning and who's losing? Industries like real estate, tourism, services, and even agriculture in the U.S. are beginning to feel the heat. Small businesses are losing customers, supply chains are disrupted, jobs are disappearing. Meanwhile, if Canada succeeds in its diversification strategy, it won't be tied to a single market ever again. It will become a more flexible and more powerful partner at the negotiation table. Will the U.S. adjust course to repair the relationship? Or will it double down? And what about the rest of the world? Will other nations follow Canada's lead and start looking for a new economic path? Don't look away. There's still so much more to come.
Breaking overnight, President Trump enacting sweeping new tariffs on steel and aluminum, 25%. Europeans are retaliating in a major way.
Will the trade relationship between the U.S., EU, and Canada collapse? Trump's re-imposition of tariffs has prompted the EU and Canada to decide on a strong response. Where will this tension lead? President Donald Trump, famous for his protectionist policies, has once again criticized the European Union. Why? According to him, the EU's unfair trade practices and the global overcapacity in production have harmed domestic industries. As a result, Trump has decided to reimpose a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports from the EU. This decision aims to protect America's strategic industries, but it also comes as a shock to EU countries, especially when the EU has always seen this as a move to protect U.S. national security.
It'll be 25%, generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And European Union is a different case than Canada.
Additionally, Trump continues to criticize the EU for its digital services tax measures, particularly adjustments targeting major U.S. tech companies like Apple and Meta. This adds another blow to the already complicated relationship between these trading partners. Faced with Trump's tariff policies, the EU is not sitting idly by. The European Union has decided to impose retaliatory measures with tariffs amounting to up to $28 billion on U.S. goods. However, the EU's goal is not just to respond, but also to hit products from key states controlled by the Republican Party. The main items affected include agricultural products, such as soybeans from Louisiana, beef and poultry from Nebraska and Kansas. Consumer goods, cars, and luxury items are also on the target list. Clearly, the EU is choosing to apply pressure on America's politically sensitive areas to force the Trump administration to reconsider its tariff policies.
Die Zollbeschlüsse der USA für falsch. Und wir werden darauf angemessen und schnell reagieren. Die Vorschläge der Kommission werden wir jetzt prüfen. Dazu stehen wir in engem Kontakt mit der Kommission und den anderen Mitgliedstaaten.
It's not just the EU. Canada is also in the mix. With retaliatory tariffs amounting to $29.8 billion Canadian dollars, around $20.7 billion US dollars, Canada is primarily targeting steel and aluminum, the products it exports the most to the U.S. This will seriously impact the steel, aluminum, and automobile industries in the U.S., industries that rely heavily on supply from Canada. In addition, these measures will affect consumer goods and automobile manufacturing industries in the U.S., which are already struggling to compete with foreign producers. How will the U.S. administration respond when its traditional partners, like Canada, ramp up retaliatory actions like this? Despite the serious trade tensions, the EU and Canada continue to maintain their long-standing strategic relationships. Especially in the context of reducing reliance on energy from Russia, the EU has sought opportunities to collaborate with Canada to export energy to the European market. This is not only an opportunity for Canada, but also a long-term strategy for the EU to ensure stability in energy supply. Canada, a country rich in mineral resources, is working together with the EU in this field, which not only helps Canada boost exports, but also helps the EU reduce reliance on suppliers from unstable countries. Undoubtedly, the tensions between the US, EU, and Canada are a crucial factor shaping the global economic order in the coming years. If the transatlantic relationship continues to escalate, it could change not just the US economy, but also the distribution of global influence. Stay tuned for the next updates in the video, as we will dive deeper into these impacts and explore what may happen in the future. A tariff decision could change the future of the US-Canada strategic relationship. Canada is entering a decisive phase, and what will be the direction of its defense and economic strategies? Tense trade relations. US. Canada. Entering a testing phase. The 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imposed by the U.S. in 2018 caused significant damage to Canada's industries, with the country's economy losing about $2.5 billion annually. However, rather than accepting defeat, Canada took strong retaliatory measures, including imposing tariffs on U.S. goods such as whiskey and steel products. Future of trade. While the trade war shows no signs of ending, Canada recognizes the need to seek new international partners, especially in light of the unpredictable policies from the U.S. Canada signs defense deal with Australia. Significant move. At the end of 2023, Canada signed a contract worth up to $6 billion Canadian to purchase long-range radar systems from Australia. Known as the Jorn radar, this system will help Canada enhance its surveillance capabilities in the Arctic, an area of increasing strategic importance due to factors such as climate change and rising military activity from Russia. Why Australia? The Jorn radar system can detect airborne targets at distances of up to 3,000 kilometers, allowing Canada to protect vast and inaccessible regions without relying on U.S. systems. Reducing dependence on the U.S. The long-term strategy. As the relationship between the two countries became increasingly strained, Canada realized it could no longer rely on the U.S., especially given the unpredictability of U.S. policies aimed at protecting its national interests. To mitigate risks, Canada began seeking more reliable international partners to protect its interests. Additional information. Since 2023, Canada has signed defense and trade agreements with the European Union and the Southeast Asia region, with the value of these agreements totaling $7 billion. The Arctic, a strategic region, strategic importance. Canada's Arctic region is increasingly becoming a focal point of importance, not only because of its rich natural resources, but also due to the growing risk of military conflict with other nations, particularly Russia. The Canadian government is focusing on enhancing defense capabilities in this region to protect national sovereignty. As global interest in the Arctic's energy resources intensifies, the competition for access to these resources is likely to grow. Canada's strategic posture will play a key role in ensuring stability and deterring adversaries in the region. With rising global tensions and new technologies emerging, the Arctic may soon become a critical front in the future of international security. Future forecast. Increasing surveillance capabilities. In the Arctic will be one of Canada's key priorities in the coming years, especially as climate change makes the region a hot spot for resource competition and geopolitical influence. As new shipping routes open up and access to untapped resources grows, Canada will need to ensure it can protect its interests in the face of rising global pressures. Strengthening international partnerships and enhancing defense infrastructure will be critical in maintaining stability and securing Canada's strategic position in the Arctic. Important strategic shifts for Canada. Decisive move. The defense contract with Australia is not just an important step in reducing dependence on the US, but also a clear message that Canada is willing to seek new partners to protect its national interests. This move could reshape Canada's foreign and defense strategy for many years to come. Strategic shift. This strategic pivot reflects a significant change in how Canada views global partners, moving away from reliance on the US in defense and economic matters. These changes may shape the future of the entire region. Don't miss the next analysis in the video.